It's part 3 of rebuilding the broken Sneaky Snake video series. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I'll put those links down below in the description. So before we get into the actual motor build in part 4, I wanted to make a quick video addressing why I made the decision to keep the car NA, since I didn't want to dilute the motor assembly video with that commentary. So it doesn't take long to poke around the comments of my videos to find the randoms just frothing at the mouth and vigorously beating their keyboards, asking the same old questions over and over and over again. When am I going turbo? Where are the turbos? How come there are no turbos? Don't I want to make 3,000 horsepower? Don't I want to be a badass? Don't I ever want to actually be fast? Hey, did I see that dude's car with the turbos? Hey, did you see that shop that does turbos? Hey, buddy, do you have any clue what you're doing? If you did, where are your turbos? So, at the risk of disappointing that kind of commentary, turbos will never happen, and not on this Viper at least. That being said, anyone who dislikes them, some spool action on a V10 is likely not a guy you want to be stuck in conversation with at a party. So I personally love me some turbos, and when the car was stock some years back, I did entertain the idea for a bit. Well, now that we've got that ear porn out of the way, here are the 3 reasons that spring to mind as to why, for me, it's a no-go. So the biggest one of all is how I use the car. Now, it may seem to a casual observer, if all you do is watch, the post that I make on YouTube, that this is a completely straight line build for me. But that honestly couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, I'd say that less than 5% of the time that I spend in this car, I'm out banging gears in a straight line. Which, don't get it twisted, I love to do, obviously. The majority of the miles in this car are from taking trips, from back road runs, blasts through the local forest, some rare autocross appearances, track days, taking the old lady out to dinner, cruising with the local stooges, that kind of stuff. So I need a car that's well-rounded, a car that has great street manners, that I can pile on the miles in, that runs pump gas, because we travel in it, and that's capable of actually running 91 when we're in states, at track days that don't have 93. And a car that's exciting to drive, but isn't turned into this kind of, one-trick pony by virtue of the modifications that I do to it. So I started out drag racing when I was younger. Mostly instances like this come to mind. But over time, I started to gravitate more towards the corners. I love the drag strip. It's kind of always going to be my first home, but I simply have more fun on a road course nowadays. So if I did anything but an NA build, I would preclude myself from doing the activities that I enjoy the most. And while there, of course, undoubtedly is going to be some troll in the comments that says, but you can track a twin turbo Viper, bro. The reality of it is, I've never in my life seen a forced induction Viper at a track day, period. And it's likely for obvious reasons like thermal management, having an on-off power band, having too much power, hanging additional weight where you want it, things like that. So NA was just natural given for what I want out of my car, and I think that most reasonable people understand that buying a car or modifying a car to suit your personal use case is the way to fly, right? Chasing clout on the internet with a high horsepower build or trying to be the fastest guy on the block, that's a losing game. So, number 2, the second reason should be familiar to anybody who's gone through a build on a car, and that's cost, right? It's absolutely a consideration for me when deciding how to proceed. It comes as no surprise to anyone that, a custom, well-engineered turbo kit for a low-volume production car like a Viper is extremely expensive. This isn't a Mustang, it's not a Camaro or a Corvette. There's no economies of scale or a huge customer base where we can, where somebody can spread out the R&D and manufacturing costs. So from the major shops, an entry-level twin turbo kit on the stock long block So stock motor starts around 60K. And by the time you check a few boxes for ancillary upgrades, you'll likely be into it for the mid 70s. If you want, big power and 1500 to 2200 wheel, which is crazy to say, but it's starting to become the norm for these Viper builds, built motor, big power setups, those are going to be into the six figures. And I mean, that's a big pill to swallow, especially since you know that that's likely going to be sunk cost, and you'll be likely to recover maybe 25 cents on the dollar if you ever go to sell the car. So now, 15 to 20 grand on a heads cam package, which likely seems outrageous if you're coming from, the small block Ford or the LS world, it starts to make more sense. If you pile on a stroker bottom end on top of that, you're probably into the 40,000 range and change. And at that point, if it's only power that you're after, I think you can start making a case for spending 70-ish to make 1200 wheel versus 40-ish to make, 700 something, right? But for me, the choice was made up by how I use the car and then validated by my inability to rationalize spending the price of another Gen 5 on a turbo kit. I know all of you guys are ballers and, you fly in your private jets and $100,000 is peanuts to all of you, but it's a big chunk of change to me. And at this point in my life, I'd rather invest the money. So third reason is what I would define as reliability and ease of maintenance. Obviously, any type of build can and will have failures, right? You're watching this video because my seemingly more reliable than forced induction NA build eventually did have a component fail. But I don't think it's debatable that part longevity and maintenance cycles shrink as power is increased. So the bigger the power, the higher the likelihood of something failing. Just looking at the experience of my friends and acquaintances that have stock motor twin turbo builds, not a single one of them is still on their original motor. Eventually, they've all blown up, they've all upgraded to built motors, bigger turbos, further supporting modifications, and all of that continues to balloon the cost, of ownership over time. So I'm sure, again, there'll be some troll in the comments that has a cream puff twin turbo Viper that gets driven to Cars and Coffee that's still on the original motor. But I place more weight on the experiences of people who drive their cars like I do, which is to say they thrash them at every opportunity, more than those with garage queens. So if I retire to the notion that I will blow it up or have issues with it at some point, which every build will, whether it's NA or forced induction, is the shop that's going to be warranting or doing the work at my cost close to me? And for me, that answer is no, right? To get support, I would have to ship my car at minimum to a different city, but likely to a different state to get it serviced. Whereas on an NA build, I have a shop that's within 20 minutes of my residence. So that was a huge consideration for me. Another point is this is truly a car that I won't ever sell. And every car guy says this. Hell, I've said this probably on every single car I've owned. But this time I mean it, I promise. There are many other cars that I want to own and I will own in the future, but I just can't think of a single vehicle for sale at any price that would give me the same kind of a driving experience that a Viper would. And that's not for saying for better or for worse, but just the powertrain in the car is unlike anything else in the market, and I doubt that there will be anything else like it. So I don't see myself parting with it ever. So given that my intention is to keep the car until I croak, I do consider what would happen if I had a turbo build and in 15, 20, 30 years down the line, the shop that built it no longer exists. So when 1500 horsepower antique rust bucket Vipers are, completely replaced by, all the kids running around in their 5,000 horsepower electric supercars, how many shops will actually be around to fix issues, to troubleshoot, do rebuilds, etc. So in general, just how many performance shops do we all know that have stood the test of time, right? I think about stuff like this. So in terms of serviceability and longevity, an NA build seems like something I would have less of a pain keeping on the road a decade or two from now. You could also make the case, and this is complete speculation from my part, that a modified NA Viper, by virtue of being closer to the original intent, could be worth more money in the future than a turbo build. right? Kind of like a Yenko Camaro first gen is coveted for their NA upgrades, even though they were not OEM, right? So that's that. You know, that's my 3 reasons for why this car is staying NA. And just to close, I want to say that everything I've mentioned is my own personal opinion injected with my own biases. So none of this is meant to be gospel or, you know, to speak in absolutes. It's just my personal reasoning and rationale for the direction that I took with my build. If you disagree with what I've said, you're more than entitled to it. I don't think there is a right way to build a car, just probably a right way for you. So I love turbo builds. I think they're awesome. I would love to build a second Viper at some point for dedicated straight line stuff with some twins. But for now, let's get back to building another NA monster. So join me for that in part 4. Thank you for watching.